Coming up this Wednesday and Beyond the Vibe, I'm joined by Jim McCarty of the legendary Yardbirds.
We went to Jimmy Page at the time.
I mean, it's not a bad fallback.
Jimmy Page used to come and see us, and of course he was a very famous session player at the time. He was playing on a lot of people's records, Gene Pitney and Petula Clark, sort of pop records really. So he didn't want to join the group. He said, "Oh, I'm doing too well as I am. I don't want to join the band." But he said, "Why don't you try my understudy, this guy called Jeff Beck?" Now, I'd never heard of him, but apparently he was in a band called the Tridents that used to play over at a venue called Eel Pie Island, which was quite near us. Giorgio arranged for an audition, and he came. He was quite different to Eric. He had long and dirty old hair, and he was covered in sort of oil because he liked working on cars.
Hi, welcome again to another Shivaree Party. I'm your host, Gene Wheat, and tonight's show is going to be filled with loads and loads of goodies. One good example, one of the 1965 top 10 sounds, the Yardbirds and I'm a Man.
It was a big break for us. We got to play as a support for the Beatles. We all had our own dressing room. We didn't really see much of the Beatles. They kept to themselves. They were very sort of protected and private because they were already huge. One day there was a knock at the door, and it was McCarty, and he had a guitar with him. And he said, "Oh, can I play you this song I've written?" We said, "Well, of course, come in, let's hear it. That'd be great." So he goes into Yesterday, the tune, but he doesn't have any lyrics, and he's singing like scrambled egg every line, scrambled egg, da 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 da, scrambled egg. And he said, "Well, I haven't done the lyrics yet," but it was obviously it was a wonderful moment. I mean, hearing a song like that, it was probably one of the Beatles' greatest songs.
So I'm here with Jim McCarty of the Yardbirds. Thank you very much for joining me. A thing I like to do to kind of start things off is I like to go back to the beginning. I like to kind of see how things all began for a musician. So growing up for you, was there a moment where you thought, this is what I want to do? I want to be a musician, and in particular a drummer?
Well, it was fun. Not really. When I was a teenager, I was in the Boys Brigade. Do you know about that? It's like a semi-military sort of organisation, band, and they have bugles and drums and things. And I think that my mum used to send me down to sort of get rid of me, And I was fascinated with playing the snare drum, and I learned all the rudiments. I think I was the lead snare drummer. I must have been quite good at it. And we used to march down the streets and all that, But I got to hear about that same time. I got to hear a lot of early American rock and roll music, like Buddy Holly and the Everly Brothers, Gene Vincent, Johnny Cash, and I really liked it. And we got together a little group at school, but I actually had to get a bigger kit, so I borrowed some money off my dad. I think it was about £11. And I saw an advert in the local newspaper, and bought this funny little kit, which was just a snare drum and a bass drum and a hi-hat. That's all it was. But it was fine, for what I was doing with the the other members of the band, and we all had the same idea, and we used to play at the school dances, the intervals and all that, and some local pubs around near the school.
Hmm. I think growing up, everybody has that band that's like their band, one that they really resonate with. Did you have one in particular?
Well, first of all, yes. I mean, it was the English band. It was the Shadows.
Mm.
Yeah, Cliff Richard was okay, but I thought the Shadows were great, and they did some great things. And I always loved all the guitars, the whammy bar and all that stuff. And also there were the Ventures, a similar American band. I like them too. But then it all changed when we heard like what we called rhythm and blues, which was just the black blues music coming in from America, around the early 60s.
Mm. Of course, the Yardbirds started in 1963. Can you kind of recall how that first came about?
Well, yes. It was a combination of two schools actually, because I was at school with Paul Samuel Smith, who was the bass player. We lived in the suburbs of London, south place called Teddington, southwest of London, about 10-15 miles out of the centre. And we were great mates, me and Paul, and what we used to love music. And it was Paul actually that I met. Actually, it was after I left school, and I bumped into him in a pub in Richmond, which is quite close. And he said, "Oh, you got to hear this this new record I've got. It's Jimmy Reed live at the Carnegie Hall." And it sort of wasn't really rock, but it was like very emotional and very raw. And I thought, oh, this is great. Yeah, oh, I really love that. And all these sort of budding musicians and art students, because the others were all from Kingston Art School, which was quite local to us. That was Keith Relf and Chris Dreyer and Topham, who was the first lead guitar player. And we always used to hang out in this pub in Kingston where all the Bohemians were, I think it was called The Crown or something like that. And first of all, Paul and Keith formed a band playing sort of country blues. And it's the first time I'd seen Keith. I thought Keith was great, playing a harmonica with his long blonde hair. And then Chris Dreyer, Topham and myself, we decided to form another band, playing sort of Bo Diddley and Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry and all that stuff. And then, to make a long story short, the two bands amalgamated, and that's how we became the Yardbirds initially. Some people sort of had to leave, but the five of us got together.
I mean, of course, a bit later in that year, Eric Clapton would join.
Yeah.
Can you recall kind of did you have an audition? What kind of happened there?
What happened was that Topham, Anthony Topham, was a very good artist, and his father was an artist, and his father was very keen on him studying art and becoming an artist in his life, and he didn't really want him to play in a group, which I don't know how much say Topham had, but there was pressure put on him, and in the end he had to leave the group. He decided to leave the group. And Clapton was another member of Kingston Art School that Keith and Chris knew, and he'd already got a bit of a reputation. He played with a band called Casey and the Engineers, as well as some other bands. The Roosters, I think he played with. And he already had a bit of a name for himself, and he just came and auditioned. Oh, well, you're like Eric, so he's going to be very very talented.
I mean, did you feel that there was something about him, when he came in and did that audition? Did he have like a bit of an X factor from the beginning?
He did. He had something about him that we didn't have. Some sort of profile or some sort of star quality, which I can't put my finger on. But he was very assured of himself, and he was obviously very enthusiastic about dressing the right way. And he dressed very Ivy League in those days, which was like an American Steve McQueen type of look. He dressed like that and had a short haircut, crew cut. But yeah, I must say I took a bit of a dislike to him straight away, because I thought he was a bit cocky. But I got used to that. We became mates and all that. We had a good sense of humor, and so we went from there.
Obviously that breakthrough moment for you guys, that first hit for Your Love. How did that happen? How did that come about? And, did it feel like there was something kind of changing at that point?
Yes, it did. Yes, we really needed a hit record, because we built up a following around that area, which was Southwest London, because we took over from the Rolling Stones playing in the Crawdaddy Club in Richmond when they had a couple of hits and they moved off, and we used to sometimes go and see them. And we got in touch with George Ogomelski, who was the promoter of the club, to try and get the gig. So he came to see us rehearse, and he actually later told me, when he was walking up the stairs hearing us, he thought, oh, they sound quite different to the Stones, but they're very similar. So I think they're enough different to book them. And I think we were doing one of those, what became known as the rave-ups. It was like a build-up of all the bass and drums and guitars all building up to this crescendo. That was one of our things we worked out that we sort of vaguely became famous for. So he booked us to play there, and we built up a following. But then, of course, we needed a hit record, so we tried various sort of bluesy type of records to record, and they didn't get anywhere. And then it was a big break for us. We got to play as a support for the Beatles, and they played in Hammersmith Apollo, which was Hammersmith Odeon at the time. It was a cinema, and we got to play at their Christmas show in 1964. And we thought, we'll be okay here. We can talk to the Beatles to get them to write us a song, because other people their songs. so we're made, sort of thing, But John Lennon, he came in with a song. It was actually a 45 record by somebody called Chuck Jackson, what was called The Breaking Point. And it was a Burt Bacharach song. And he said, oh, try this. This is, I think this is quite poppy. But it wasn't really for us. It was a Burt Bacharach song. But there happened to be, our luck was in, because there happened to be a publisher in the audience that had a demo disc of a song written by Graham Gouldman, who was a young up-and-coming songwriter from Manchester. And of course, that was For Your Love. And he thought that would suit us, because we were doing tempo changes and all that sort of thing. And he thought, oh, this is a bit of a different sort of group. So he got that demo over to Giorgio, who actually by then became our manager. And we all liked it. We all thought, "Oh, this is the song that's going to do it for us," because it was very poppy. It was quite moody, but it was different. But it wasn't really a blues song, you know. It was much more commercial pop song, which sort of Eric took exception to. So he didn't like that idea. He thought we were going poppy and reservations about, you know, various members of the group as well. And so he decided to leave. So he recorded For Your Love. He played in the middle of it. But then when it came out, he'd already left. And we went to Jimmy Page at the time.
I mean, it's not a bad fallback.
Telling you all this because I'm doing this now as part of our show. I talk through the history, and we have a back projection, and we play the songs as they come up. So this is our sort of new show. So I've memorized this fairly well. But so going back, yeah, we Jimmy Page used to come and see us, and of course he was a very famous session player at the time. He was playing on a lot of people's records. You know, Gene Pitney and Petula Clark. You know, sort of pop records really. So he didn't want to join the group. He said, "Oh, I'm doing too well as I am. I don't want to join the band." But he said, "Why don't you try my understudy, this guy called Jeff Beck?" Now, I'd never heard of him, but apparently he was in a band called the Tridents that used to play over at a venue called Eel Pie Island, which was quite near us. So Giorgio arranged for an audition, and he came. You know, he was quite different to Eric. He had long and dirty old hair, and he was covered in sort of oil because he liked working on cars. He liked to get under cars and work on their engines and all that. And he wasn't bothered what he looked like, but he sure could play. You know, he really could play. And so we sort of fell on our feet there because, well, he did too, because he came in just as we were, had a big hit record. But he had much more of a varied style, and he would play lots of different styles. He played blues, but as you know, he played lots of a variety of styles, and it suited us because we became known as a psychedelic band. I guess people thought we were on drugs or something because the psychedelic is related to drugs, and but Jeff had all those sounds, and made us sound really different. And of course, by the time we went to the States, people saw us in America, and they wondered what we were all about. It was like they were very excited with us. So we always did really well in America.
I mean, I just kind of want to back up a little bit because obviously you mentioned the Beatles and being in the dressing room there. I mean, I recall hearing a story about how Paul McCartney came in and played like an early song of what would be Yesterday to you guys.
Yes, he did.
How did that happen? Like, what did you think about that at the time? Was it?
Well,
did you feel like a hit?
Well, it was quite mind blowing because he. We all had our own dressing room. We didn't really see much of the Beatles. They kept to themselves. They were very sort of protected and private because they were already a huge and one day there was a knock at the door, and it was McCartney, and he had a guitar with him, and he said, "Oh, can I play you this song I've written? You know, we said, well, of course, come in, let's hear it. That'd be great. So he goes into Yesterday, the tune, but he doesn't have any lyric, and he's singing like scrambled egg for every line. You know, scrambled egg, da 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 da, scrambled egg. And he said, well, I haven't done the lyrics yet, but it was obviously it was a wonderful moment. I mean, hearing a song like that, it was probably one of the Beatles' greatest songs, and I don't know, it was really special. This is a really special song, and thank you very much for playing it to us. But you might have to change the lyrics.
Yes, don't think the scrambled egg thing would fit. Of course, going back to that Beck era of the Yardbirds. I mean, you were on a high. You were producing all these kind of hit singles at the time. Including Shapes and Things, which of course has been covered numerous times, and I believe it was classed as kind of one of the first kind of psychedelic rock kind of songs. How did that come about, and like did you feel like you were kind of moving in more of that direction, more towards that kind of psychedelic stuff?
Yes, we we were part of the British invasion, and that was very interesting for us. America was something special for us then. Where all the Western movies had come from, and the gangsters and the blues musicians and the jazz and everything else, and we were already quite popular because we'd had For Your Love and Heart Full of Soul as hits. And then it was an idea of Giorgio, because Giorgio, as I said, he was our manager, and he was on the road with us, and it was his idea to go into Chess Studios in Chicago to record, and so we got this sort of song together, and we started off with a little bass riff we got off a jazz record. It was a bit of a pinch, and then we sort of very simple chords around it, and put a middle eight in. Basically wrote a song about the the vulnerable state of the world, what was going on in the Vietnam War and all that stuff. And Jeff did a wonderful solo. He did a double track. He did 2 tracks of solo, and he just let rip, really. For what he was famous for, and of course the solo became one of the great psychedelic solos. Everyone seems to say that, and it was a big hit, and I was very proud of it, because we'd written the song, and we'd recorded it at a great time for us. 1966 in a great studio, so I was very happy with that.
Of course, in 66 Jimmy Page would finally join. Obviously he was on bass though first, wasn't he?
Yes. Do you want the story of that?
Go, because obviously you've got quite a lineage already here. This is all in like a 4 or 5 year period that this is all going on. We've gone from Clapton, Jeff Beck. You've now convinced Jimmy Page to join, but you've said you'll have to settle for bass.
Yeah, well, it was a question. Paul Samuel Smith, my old school friend, he didn't really like touring. He found it very, very hard, and he was a very sensitive guy, and but he was very, very clever. He had some great ideas, a good producer. He became our producer, but we got we got to this gig in England, and we were playing at a May ball at Oxford University, and that consisted of a big ball with everyone dressing up in their ball gowns, and tuxedos or whatever, and playing through the night. So they had these different bands playing in different stages through the night, and we had to play 3 1-hour spots. And there was lots of food and lots of alcohol available. You could just drink what you like, more or less. And Keith was always a bit prone to getting drunk, so he got quite drunk by the time we went on the third time. And we started playing, and he started sort of falling over almost. But he started sort of talking down to the audience, insulting them. And of course, Paul was a bit of a snob, and he found that really difficult. He was insulting all the Oxford Dons, and so at the end of the show, he said, "Oh, I've had enough. That's enough for me. I'm leaving right now."
Wow.
So. The interesting thing was there was a link with Jimmy because he was actually at the show, and he was in the audience watching. I don't know what made him go, but I think he was with some other people in bands, and he thought it was a great show. And he talks about, there's a documentary on us that just came out on Sky, and he talks about it, and he says, "So well, I thought that the band was great, and I thought it was like an early punk band, and it was very exciting." And he said, at the end of the show, I went into their dressing room to congratulate them, and they were all having a big argument. "Oh, I don't know about this. I better not go in. I won't go in." But afterwards we called him up, and he said, "Oh, I'll come in and play bass. I'm happy to join the band now."
Mm. Obviously, at some point there, you moved to dual guitars. What was that was that a natural progression? Did Jimmy Page always see himself as, I'm going to eventually move to guitar?
I have no idea what he was thinking. He just, he liked the band. He always liked the band, and he liked to play that sort of music. And he liked going on the road, he really seemed to enjoy it. But it was a bit silly with Chris Dreyer playing guitar. So Chris went on bass, and I thought that was very brave because from guitar to bass sometimes it's not easy. And of course, he was letting Jimmy play guitar. So yeah, the two of them started playing guitar, and they were some of the time it was great. They were playing off each other and playing the riffs together and all that. But a lot of the time it wasn't like that. It was it was they were trying to outdo each other. They're very different characters because Jimmy was very used to playing sessions, and he was always down to earth and keeping it cool and being very businesslike about it. But Jeff was like, he just played off the top of his head. He was very nervous and couldn't really cope with it. It was very difficult for him, which led to his downfall in a way, because in the end he couldn't take it anymore.
Obviously Jimmy would start and use that cello bow. How do you kind of react to that at the time? I mean, I'm sure maybe at least somebody did it once before, but it certainly wasn't a common thing to see. How do you what was the thought in the room? Did it seem a bit too strange?
No, not at all. I mean, we were a band like that. We always wanted to do weird and wonderful things. We didn't care. We did, and after Jeff left, there was a four-piece, and it worked pretty well because Jeff was always very moody, and you never knew what was going to happen, if he was going to kick the amps off stage or storm off,
Right.
But the four-piece sort of really worked quite well, and it was all on a very level playing field all the time, and we used to wear caftans, and Keith used to go around with an incense burner. So it's all really sort of psychedelic or whatever. No, whatever Jimmy did, we encouraged it. We liked it. We played a song called Glimpses, and it was all very. It had sort of back projection and tape talking and all that stuff. It was quite strange, but we enjoyed all that stuff.
Of course, the band would eventually kind of break up. Page going on to do Led Zeppelin, and obviously you would start Renaissance. Did it just kind of feel like it was coming to an end? I mean, you were doing a lot of touring at that point. Did you just kind of all get burnt out?
Well, yes. Yes. Yeah, the thing was, it was the business really changed because it was all about hit records, hit singles. We had a few of those, and it was like you got to the point where, what's our next hit single? and we sort of ran out of steam. It was very difficult, especially without Paul and Jeff. They were both really creative people, and we couldn't come up with another Shapes of Things or anything like that. It was difficult. Of course, we went to Mickey Most, who was the big hit producer of the time, to try and get us a hit, and it didn't work. It was just a complete mess. He just suggested all the wrong songs, and he didn't want us to write any songs. Just do covers of pretty naff songs, really. 10 Little Indians and Art and the Clown. It wasn't really us.
Of course, when you went and did Renaissance, did you want to do something different at that point? Of course, that's a bit different from what you'd done before at that point.
Yeah, I think we'd done about 4 or 5 years, and most of that time we were on the road, so we were pretty tired, and also playing that sort of music. We thought, let's play something a bit more gentle, or something a bit more folky. And actually, it was like we turned into a prog band. It was an early prog band. And it was quite refreshing, to do that sort of stuff. Of course, based around a keyboard rather than a lead guitar.
I mean, was that kind of the reason to why Page went in the other direction? I mean, you guys just kind of thought, let's do something different. Let's start a new thing.
Yeah, well, he was fresh to it, and he hadn't been in the band that long, and he had good ideas, and he wanted to carry on that sort of heavy stuff, and we sort of had it with that. We wanted a bit of a break. If I look back on it now, and I think, we could have done something about it. Maybe we could have had a bit more breaks, but there was always a pressure. You always had to keep going all the time. I had to be in the public eye, and when's the next tour?
Yeah. It does seem like, I mean, I was looking at kind of bands releasing singles and albums back in that era, and it every year, I mean, there's bands that were releasing like 2 records a year and then touring, and it just seems like a hell of a lot to do. I mean, like I look at musicians now, and it's there's a couple of years between a record. Whereas, I look at, I don't know, a Black Sabbath or something, they release their first 2 albums in the space of a year.
Yeah.
And it's it's like, wow, you know, it's so much, isn't it? I mean, I can imagine that a lot of bands were just getting burnt out in that period.
Yeah, I think it did happen to. I can't think of any, but I think it did happen to other bands. Yeah,
Mm,
and trying to find a hit single, you know, because the albums, they weren't really selling
mm,
at the time. The album market didn't really happen until, you know, the 70s.
mm,
And suddenly, well, Led Zeppelin, they didn't need a single. They just had, you know, great big selling albums.
mm.
But that was the way the market changed as well.
You know, obviously you would eventually be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in '92. Um, what was that like for you? I mean, you know, years later at that point, I imagine that, you know, it was great to kind of be recognized for doing something, you know, right at the beginning.
Well, we always had that. We always had that reputation, and it never really died. To be honest, it was always there was always I was always, you know, one of the Yardbirds.
Mm, yeah.
People wanted me to jam with them or form a group or something or other, and but I never really thought we were so important, you know, to get into. So I was very gratified to get into the Hall
Mm,
of Fame, and I could understand why we got in. But I never really, as I said, I never thought we were great or anything like that. But it seems to be a sort of thing that keeps going, and people still love it. And well, I still play.
mm,
I still have a Yardbirds band, and we're doing this new show.
mm.
And the people are very loyal to it, you know, and it keeps one of those things that keeps on going.
I mean, was that kind of part of your thoughts on bringing the band back in this kind of new iteration? Did you just feel that there was, you know, something that you still wanted to do with that?
Well, I've got two choices. You know, I could be in the band and then play all the songs, and that's in a way it's a little bit tiring,
Mm,
as well as having the idea of talking the history. Somebody suggested that to me some time ago, going through the Yardbirds history, and I've seen a couple of people doing it, and
mm,
it's so interesting, you know, for people that don't know all those things.
yeah.
You know, you obviously know a lot more, but people know. Oh yeah, they had a few hits, and they had Jeff Beck and all that. But you know, to hear the whole story, I think it'd be good. But of course, it's only an experiment, so we're
Mm.
trying it out.
I mean, you were about to go and, well, you're doing that in April, aren't you? You're starting like a bit of a tour.
Yes, yeah. I'm doing I'm doing a Beatles fest. I've never done that before
Mm,
in New Jersey. So I'm gonna try that there. I'm gonna talk a bit about the history and of course bring in all the Beatles stories,
mm,
and then we're gonna do it with the Yardbirds band and go through all the hits as well and play through the songs, and then sort of end up with doing about 5 or 6 songs all in a row to complete the show. You know.
I mean, how did you go about kind of assembling a new Yardbirds band? I mean, it's kind of I imagine particularly for the guitarist role, it's quite daunting. You know, you got to
Oh, yeah.
follow.
Well, it's daunting, yeah, but at the same time, there's lots of people that want to do it,
Mm,
especially guitar players. You know, because I get emails from guitar players all the time saying, "Oh, do you need a guitarist? Or have you seen this guy? He's really good." And everyone wants to be a Yardbirds guitarist. It's
mm.
one of those things.
So I imagine you've just had swamped with offers.
Well, yeah, it hasn't been difficult, but I'm lucky, you know, because the American band are really nice guys. They know all
Mm,
their stuff. They're very good, and also the show is good because it's a modern PA, and of course we were when we were playing in the States in 1966, on these little amps, and no PA, nothing can be heard properly, and the drums weren't mic'd up, but now it's like a great show.
Mm. I mean, thinking about that there, did you, back in the day, could you hear everything that was going on? Of course you're playing the drums, but like totally different setup to the way it is today.
No, to be honest, sometimes because the drums weren't mic'd, as I said, and sometimes I couldn't even hear the drums. I was only hearing the lead guitar. Well, of course, the vocal I couldn't hear, so all I could hear was these lead guitars going on, which could be good or bad.
So how do you play along then if you're only hearing one member?
Well, I somehow managed to do it. I don't know how it came over out the front. Perhaps it was terrible, but that was an extreme. I think some of the time that happened, but I think most of the time I heard a bit of something, but not like it is now.
A question I always like to finish on that I ask every guest that comes on. It's a bit of a hypothetical one. If you could perform with one musician from the past and one from the present, who would they be? Of course, you've had Clapton, you've had Page, you've had Jeff Beck, but is there any others that you'd like to, if you could?
I guess Hendrix was the top of all of them, wasn't he? That would have been good. Yeah, I wouldn't mind playing with Hendrix. But as far as modern musicians, I'm not really sure. People like Brian Mayer, they're still playing, aren't they?
Yeah, they're still playing.
Very good. Some very good jazz musicians, but I don't really know many modern people.
Hendrix is a great one, isn't it? A guy that just changed everything, isn't it? It's
yes. That incredible sound, and he just really went for it,
Yeah.
And had this great technique.
I spoke with a chap called Roger Earl, who's in Foghat, and he auditioned for Jimi Hendrix. He's a drummer. He's a drummer as well. And he was saying, like, when he sat behind the kit and Hendrix just started, like, he was saying he was just playing noises. And he was just sat there and he says, I was looking around and I just didn't even know how to respond to that. Like, how do you come in? How do you... So I imagine it's a bit of a nightmare for a drummer in the early years.
Well, I have no idea. It must have been sort of a nightmare and exciting at the same time. Yeah. But I knew Mitchell because he we did a tour once. I think we were playing with Manfred Mann or something.
Yeah.
And he was in a band called the Riot Squad, and it was sort of very poppy, sort of straight band. And I was very surprised to see him playing with Hendrix, and he was playing, this incredible style. He was playing really very, very good. Very not like he was in the Riot Squad. He was just a straight drummer. He had a lot of space for the three of them.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great speaking with you. And of course, for those out there that are in the States that want to catch you on tour, they can grab a ticket via the link in the description below.
Yeah.
And they can come hear more of your amazing stories. I just find it mad that all of this happened in a 4-5 year period. It's just like to have all of that. That's like 2 lifetimes worth, isn't it?
It really is. Yes, it really is. I've been incredibly lucky, but of course it's been a roller coaster at the same time.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.